Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, Vice Chair of the Libertarian National Committee, and in this live stream, what I want to do is just reflect on yesterday's meeting and try to put things in clarity because everyone's kind of like got super heated up emotions, and that's not necessarily always helpful. So the goal is to put things in context and just kind of help explain the context of what's happening in the meeting, what's going to happen, and just so that way everyone has some clarity moving forward. Okay. So basically, over the last week, as I explained before, basically what happens, we're in a situation where, due to the pandemic, due to just everything that's going on politically, economically, health-wise, it was just impossible to hold the convention on the original weekend at the original place. So the question became, what do you do? Okay. And there's an endless spectrum of possibilities. The problem is you don't have all the time in the world to go through every possibility, to explore every little nook and cranny. So we have to do the best we can within the reasonable time. And one of the things about being in a deliberative body, and this is why people are quick to criticize people who are on a deliberative body, because the deliberative body does change how you behave. Like, everyone on the LNC are people that I totally respect, admire, and like. Okay, I've gotten to know all of them over the last 2 years, and they're all really cool. Okay, they're all really cool. They've all done really cool stuff. They're all super libertarian. Trust me. They're really dedicated to the cause. Okay, that's why some of them have served on the LNC for as long as they have, and are as fierce in their actions on the LNC as they are, because they care, because it matters to them, and that's something I highly respect and admire. So there's no question to me that everyone on the LNC are good people. The problem is when you're on a deliberative body, the dynamic can sometimes change. So it's not so much like any of these people one-on-one I think would be amazing. It's just when you're in a deliberative body, in certain situations when tough decisions need to be made, you begin. It's impossible to kind of communicate with everybody all the time, and the problem is you don't know what communication is going on outside of the communications you've made. So this is sort of like, if you ever play chess, there's this sort of strategic element into helping everyone sort of plays out in the effort to do what they think is the right decision, because again, everyone's there to try to help move things in the direction they think is right. Problem is, when people's minds tend to imagine or start thinking strategically, sometimes it ends up putting them in positions where they behave in ways where it's not necessarily they're better angels. Okay. And I think that was on full display this last week. And again, it wasn't that anyone had bad intentions. It's just that some people felt very strongly about what the right course of action was, and were doing tactically what they felt they needed to do to get the outcome that they wanted on all sides. This is why generally I've tried to spend the last 2 years fairly neutral about outcomes. Okay, except for it obviously sort of bad moves. Okay, in the sense where, like, there's two plausible moves, and maybe one I like better than the other, but I've always tried to kind of stick to sort of reading the room and kind of going somewhere in the cross of what makes sense that the LNC can pass versus what's something that kind of fits with the party, delegates, etc. It's a needle you have to thread, and it's tough to do when you spend too much time having your own opinion on it. It's not that I don't have an opinion, or I couldn't, but I'm sort of, you're representing other people, and I think everyone generally gets that, except this was a fairly sort of pivotal moment, and there was just no good decision. In the sense, again, the decision: what do you do? Do you hold an all online virtual convention? That's one option. Obviously, the option that Chairman Sarwark was sort of most passionate about. And this option has upsides in the sense that we could do it theoretically on the original weekend, which would mean we could select our presidential candidate, which means that would also protect people's health. But, the problem with a virtual convention is trying to craft the medium, where you can kind of mock a deliberative, the freedom, the interactivity of an actual physical convention as best as possible, which is something that's still kind of being worked on, which I heard there was improvement on. I wasn't in the second mock convention that they had this last week. I heard the second one was a lot better. I'll have to see when they do the next one. And also, not everyone is technologically savvy to participate, even if you do address all those concerns. And you always have the issue of socioeconomics, okay? So whether it's a physical convention or a virtual convention, okay, the same person who probably may not have a computer that's fast enough or an internet connection that's fast enough to participate virtually is probably also going to be the person who's going to struggle to buy the plane ticket and the hotel ticket to participate physically. So you always have some level of a struggle for the Povertarians. And at that point, to kind of overcome that struggle, that's just something we have to kind of help each other out, because we should try to make sure that we maximize representation among the diverse group that is our delegates, that is our Libertarian Party membership. So, but that's a different discussion. That's outside the bounds of sort of what do we do. Okay, so there's a virtual convention. Then there's a physical convention, okay? Physical convention, we know how to do that, okay? Even though, if you've been to one of the Libertarian National Conventions, it's always a fun ride. We know how to do that. The great thing about a physical convention is that we all get together, and generally this is the point where we all bury the hatchet and get along and get together and finally move forward, okay? I remember how tense things got right before the 2018 convention, how divided things got. But coming out of the 2018 convention, there was a grander spirit of camaraderie. While some of those divisions once again reopened and whatnot, at least for a period of time, we were on the same page again. So theoretically, you want to have a physical convention so we can have that. Problem is, not only can people who financially not be able to attend, and then people would have to rebook flights, rebook hotels, and those flights might be more expensive than their original flight, or might be less expensive, and now they're stuck with this travel credit. It's on a different date, so they have to request off for work from a different date. So there's practical reasons people wouldn't be able to attend that new date. There's the health reasons where people may not want to come because, regardless of the whole, while things look like they're trending better in the world of the COVID pandemic, there's no guarantee. And there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to COVID still, far as, what's the best ways to treat it, what is the long-term damage that it causes, and what are the best ways to sort of prevent. We have more knowledge than we did in January, but we don't know. There's just a lot of unknowns. So the thing is that there is a lot of people who, it's not necessarily fear, but out of concern for their loved ones. Because again, last thing you want to do is you go to a convention, you go back to home, you infect your family, you infect your friends, you get infected yourself. We have members who are in high risk cases, whether immunocompromised or elderly or whatnot, and who don't want necessarily a lot of the founding members to participate. So there's that concern, okay, with the physical convention. But again, it's doable. It's perfectly fits within our bylaws. Again, it helps sew those bridges. So these were the two extremes. Far as, okay, what are the two options we can do? And then there's this sort of infinite shades of gray in the middle, which is kind of where we ended up, which is generally, if a deliberative body is doing its job, it should generally end up somewhere in the middle. Okay? There shouldn't be necessarily a group of people who just dominate the discussion and just do what they want. And that was sort of the problem here. Everyone kind of wanted to do what they want, and so everyone's fear was someone else is going to make a motion to do what they want before they make a motion to do what they want, which definitely affected the ability to have more of a communication. In the first meeting, and also I think probably, going back to when the meeting was first called for, we didn't know as much about what our options were going to be at the time. So the definition and the scope of the meeting probably wasn't well defined and hurt our, in hindsight, we should have had a clearer agenda that said, discussion first, motion second, or something like that. Some sort of and this is advice to anyone who's going to be on the LNC in the future, when you propose sort of ad hoc meetings, special meetings, propose them with a specific agenda that allows there to be sufficient discussion and exploration before motions get moved. Okay? Because that was sort of the issue in both meetings. Everyone was trying to get things done before we just fought it out. And here's the problem with the deliberative body. It's going to take time. It takes time to make decisions because everyone has to fight it out first. That's just the way it is. Okay? So again, while I wasn't married to any particular decision, I did not feel like there was enough discussion in the first meeting. Okay? And then, yes, was information given beforehand? Yes. But that's not the point. Having information is not the same thing as having a discussion or being told what your options are, which we did. Was done at the beginning of the meeting where there was a brief overview of a report produced by the COC. I was expecting we'd just have discussion, that we would fight a little bit, that's just to get to a place where we can move forward without people clawing back. And the only way you get there is to literally let everybody just take a stab at it. Okay? Because as long as people feel like there's a possibility that they could have had their way, they're going to try to have their way. Okay? Which is very much what informed the way I behaved this last meeting and this yesterday. So this next meeting goes, okay, there's discussions going on for like a compromise, which is pretty much what we do in the end, which I was in support of. But it's very clear during the week that Chairman Torwork is going to try for a virtual convention. Again, I'm doing my best to be fairly neutral in all this. So again, whatever happens. I just want there to be a decision that's final, that we don't. So there's the mock meetings, and we should do those because those mock convention meetings we should perfect our ability to do stuff online. But even if it's not for this convention, or even as just a contingency, we need to have that. So I was very encouraged by that. People were upset because it was such short notice, and I kind of understand that. In context, when you put it in context, again, they didn't know any earlier that they were going to do these meetings. They really decided in the mornings and then executed them in the afternoon. The first one didn't go so well. I wouldn't say it went horrible. I mean, it was supposed to be a test run. It was supposed to see what it would be like, to see what needs to be fixed, and then do it again. And the second one, I imagine, didn't have as little notice because they wanted to get one more go around before the meeting. In hopes that, I'm sure, the idea being in the hopes that a better one goes around, it strengthens the argument for a virtual convention. Which I heard it went better, I just wasn't there. So, but what I've heard from people who participated in that second one, it was a big step in the right direction. I look forward to, I think what they've done is they've actually gotten in touch with Zoom. So now it's a little bit more customized to this particular context. But I'm not sure what it looks like or how it's functionally different. But I look forward to seeing that because that's cool. Okay, so we go into Saturday morning, and I've talked to many members of the LNC, not all of the members of the LNC, but I've talked to a handful of the members of the LNC over the week. And at first, it seemed like everyone was kind of moving towards the compromise. And then Saturday morning, Nick posts sort of what his intention during the meeting is. So the intention is to make the motion to reconsider, and then if the motion to reconsider passes, make his motion, at which point that motion would be challenged, whatnot. I'm like, okay. And again, as I said before, if someone wants something enough, they're gonna keep clawing at it until you let them until you let them try. Okay, so my attitude is, you know what? We're gonna end up in this meeting, and if we don't let Nick take a shot at having his ruling stand, at having the virtual convention motion pass, it's just going to be a constant substitute motion, constant other motion, constant, until there's an opportunity for us to vote definitively one way or the other. That was just me reading the situation. So I was like, okay, at some point the gavel's going to be passed to me, and I want to let things go, reading the room, and let the vote happen. Because either the body moves in that direction or it doesn't. And it was inevitably going to get there. We could either waste a lot of time in fighting it or get it over with and either move in that direction or move in another direction, which is what we did. And even then, again, the intention was to try to do that right away, which fortunately things didn't happen that way, because what I wanted to happen is we hear from the hotel reps first, then we go to executive session, and that's what happened, which was good. Because a lot of discussion. One, knowing the hotel, you want to have as much information you have before any decision gets made, before any business gets conducted. That's why it was important to listen to the hotel reps first. Executive session. Well, I can't go into what was done during or talked about in executive session. It was valuable time. It was a long time, but it was valuable. A lot of good questions were asked, a lot of good answers that were very clarifying for me on like legalities, parliamentarianism, as per this very unique context. And also came very clear to me that we were sort of in uncharted waters, that people didn't have, that basically we're walking down paths that haven't been necessarily walked down before. Which means that there's latitude, but that latitude, if not careful, can set precedents. Okay, so that without getting into the details, was clear to me after that. A lot clearer sort of what people have to do. At that point, though, afterwards, I'm presiding, so me being able to sort of opine on things was out the window. So I just had to kind of move things forward, and then we got to the point where, yes, I am not I'm not the grandest parliamentarian, but everyone on all sides was trying to take advantage of that by trying to sort of, was it Monday morning quarterback or passenger seat drive, and try to guide me along the way, trying to make it but in the. So I was just sticking to sort of because again I had thought about this before the meeting, what was going to go down. So I just kind of tried to stick to that. It played out the way I expected it to play out, because you read the room, and the room was, but there was a few. I definitely made I made a lot of mistakes. That's just the reality of it. But I was trying to facilitate, movement, and I was prepared to be there for all night into Sunday, because I knew we were gonna have to fight this out before there was a conclusion. So it goes on. Where I did make a mistake, that I did not intend to do, is that I did want people to vote on what Nick intended as his ruling, because I wanted there to be a definitive opinion on that. Whether they gave a yes or no, I just wanted there to be sort of, instead of like two or three people really arguing about this over and over again, I just wanted there to be a vote by the entire body. And I wanted it to be where it was definitive, okay, which is why I ruled that the motion was in order, not in order, because as Karen mentioned, it does matter vote-wise. Okay, so if I ruled it in order and it's ruled out of order, that's a much more definitive statement from the body than if I had done the opposite. Okay, and a more definitive statement would then allow us to move forward if that was the case, or we would, or we would have just moved in the other direction, I guess. Again, I wasn't married to a particular outcome. I was mostly in favor of the compromise, but again, I was open to whatever path. So that happens. Then we get into the whole world of substitute motions, and I didn't know what was going to go down there. I figured we would do something, or I was figured that the original Smith motion that was had prior notice, we would somehow resolve the reconsideration, or Smith would propose his wording as substitute motion. He didn't, and I guess I can understand. I don't. It was a weird moment, and a lot of things were happening really fast, and so there's a lot of different substitute motions. So I think first Alicia did a substitute motion to nail down Orlando, which for the most part I think passed. Because at least out of the locations, that seemed to be the one that makes the most sense. So that made sense. And then there was Joe Bishop Henchman's substitute motion, and apparently there was a breakdown of the compromise at some point. I don't know the full details of that. I don't know what happened. I hadn't heard that, so again, I couldn't say anything at the time. I was presiding, so I was just being presiding. You gotta just keep your mouth shut at that point. So basically, luckily, there was a recess, and during that recess, they figured it out. Okay, or they had some sort of discussion. They made it work, because the compromise all week was get the presidential vote out of the way. Because here's the thing: even if you criticize a virtual convention for not being the best place to discuss and do business, presidential and POTUS and VPOTUS are not deliberative. There's no debate during that particular vote. The presidential candidates do have to speak to their motions, which they'll still be able to, but there's no, you're not worrying about taking motions and, voting down, up and down business and whatnot. So that's easily enough to execute online in a way that honors everything, in the sense that it's a vote with integrity. Okay, and any risks to the integrity of the vote exists in a physical convention, because when you're handing a bunch of pieces of paper to another person who then reports it, okay, there's a lot of room for mistakes to happen. So I believe there's a lot less room for mistakes to happen when people can only vote once. Again, I don't know if they're still planning to handle that. Well, the actual voting mechanism hasn't been decided yet, but there's a lot of legit ways to make sure that people who are credentialed vote. I know I proposed, Slack as a possibility, probably not for the POTUS vote, but in general, it's a way where you can really make sure that the people who you said should vote. And there are other methods. There's OPA vote, I've heard people talk about, and Votes is another one I heard. I'm not as familiar with these platforms. I'm familiar with OPA vote, and I like OPA vote. But we'll see what they come up with. Okay. So that, but the issue. Okay. So basically, and I mean that was still not perfect per se, because you basically had two sort of. And then Erin proposed her substitute motion, and the difference while they were both kind of doing the same thing, presidential before physical convention, there was a nuance between the two of them. Okay, so the henchman motion, after being amended, basically what it is that you have you essentially, and again with the voting down of the previous of the chair's ruling, my ruling. Because what I did unintentionally was, again, I wanted people to vote on essentially Nick's ruling that was based on Oliver Hull's opinion, so that way there would be sort of a clear vote in either direction on that. My mistake was I just clearly, and it was just mainly just in the moment I couldn't think clearly because it was just so many voices. What basically I said. My opinion was solely based on Oliver Hull's opinion, which basically I don't think there is much of a difference. I still, when I read them, I think they're fairly in line. But there is a nuance that the board was seeing in it, that Oliver Hull's opinion had a little bit more latitude, gave a little bit more latitude to the LNC versus Nick's ruling that more clearly, or at least I think the thought was that more clearly states that we have the ability to do a virtual convention in sort of more extreme or extenuous circumstances or whatever. Okay, so there was a slight nuance. So it was imperfect, but that ended up allowing sort of the next motion, because technically the way the board looked at it is that my ruling basically would give the LNC too much latitude. So that means a more narrower interpretation could still facilitate sort of the compromise solution. Not my intention. That was purely a mess up on my part, as far as, which is not. I mean, I guess it kind of worked out by accident, but wasn't my intention. I was just heat of the moment. I wasn't thinking clearly. A lot of people were screaming their opinions at me, and not, I did get to use his gavel quite a bit. Yes, I'm glad I bought this off Amazon. Um, so that was that. I mean, but okay. So back to the difference between the two substitute motions. So Joe's motion basically again says there's extenuating circumstances. So because there's extenuating circumstances, because there's, and again, this was a big thing throughout the day that there's this. I kept hearing from different figures that it's not just impossibility, okay, but there's also impracticality. And if impracticality flies, that's a whole different bar, okay. And then, as far as again, what hurdle do we have to jump through to have latitude? So, well, everyone kept saying, well, it's not impossible. So if it's not impossible, we can't do it. I kept hearing from figures with authority that impracticality was also sort of lumped in there with impossibility. And impracticality is a different word. Okay, something can be not impossible, but impractical. Meaning, if you could do it, it still doesn't make sense to do it, in a sense. Okay, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm sure that's not the exact legal definition of impracticality, but I'm sure it's within the spirit. So to me, if we want to do something, we have the legroom. Okay. Again, there's a different question of can we versus should we. But again, the difference is the Bishop-Henchman motion basically carves that out, basically saying, okay, we're in this extreme situation, so this is not something you can do normally. And since this is not something you can do normally, we are going to change the planned convention in one way, where there's a sitting, an initial sitting, and then a second sitting. Initial sitting will be virtual, and will allow, and will handle POTUS and VPOTUS. That's the amended version of it. Originally had the whole slate, which was sort of where the breakdown of the lines came down, because originally, again, it was VPOTUS, then everything else later. So that was at the first sitting, okay, virtually, and the idea is that we would then adjourn to the physical meeting in Orlando in July. Okay, so that's one possibility, and the thing about that is that since it is technically a convention, then that POTUS VPOTUS nomination would be official. It will been ratified by a Libertarian Party convention with credentialed delegates. Okay, and but the downside is like, again, once you actually gavel in a convention, you don't know what delegates may decide to do. Okay, so delegates can then start playing with the agenda and whatnot. That's always the fear. Parties on either side could try to play around by but the idea is, I believe you can't believe, at some point you have to have a little bit of faith, I guess. Considering this, in the compromise, in the big picture, not in the specific way it's executed, in any way it's executed, in the grand picture, it squares a lot of it. One, it gives people the ability to participate in the presidential, vice presidential nomination earlier because it has ballot access ramifications. Two, it allows people to participate in that. And again, it's not a deliberative vote, so it's just a matter of actually executing a vote for your preferred candidate. So it allows more people to participate, which is good. It allows people to not be concerned about their health concerns. And this does not preclude the possibility that in July, when the physical meeting is held, that there is some sort of mechanism for allowing people to participate virtually, which seems like the consensus is that not any individual could participate virtually, but that a slate of delegates that doesn't think they can make it. And again, these are things that have not yet been figured out, because problem is, far as that goes, sort of allowing sort of virtual participation in the convention, that still has to be done by the delegates at the convention. So there is, far as like hybrid, the hybrid option, far as doing physical and virtual at the same time, that has to be done by the delegates at convention. Because the only way we can do essentially, the only time we can do something in a virtual space with the current bylaws is you have to kind of hit that impracticality or impossibility standard, and even then you have to operate as close to the spirit of the bylaws as possible, or at least you should. Again, because you enter at that point, it's fuzzy. When things are fuzzy, it's just you do your best. Then there was the substitute motion by Aaron, and Aaron's motion, basically said that there would be a vote. A vote that would occur. That's not necessarily binding. It's just a vote that the LNC would ratify, sometime in June. I did, and I understood the point or the intention of it. The idea was that I don't know what the exact intention was, but I imagine some of the benefits were where that technically that version of the outcome, you're not gaveling in a convention, which means there's no threat to a July physical meeting because you don't have to worry about whether delegates do something weird. And then the LNC would ratify it, although I don't think the LNC necessarily has the power to ratify a decision like that. Because, the idea was through the vacancy clause, but I think, as it was discussed earlier, I think during a recess, there was a discussion of this, that the vacancy clause, as understood, is for officers. So, if an officer leaves, if I were to resign tomorrow, how would you handle that? That's sort of where the fill vacancies is. And then theoretically, if there's no convention, you could possibly stretch that clause to nominate VP POTUS. But in this motion, there would still technically be a physical convention at some point. So the question is, do you hit the threshold for filling vacancies? So I think that was sort of the big, nuanced issue with this motion. So there's that. And then also the issue is selected delegates, because technically there's no delegates till the convention. There's people who've been selected to be delegates and alternates, but you're not a delegate till you get credentialed at the convention. So saying that delegates can do something before the convention. So there was some cleaning up of the wording, making it selected delegates, but the wording got cleaned up. I still voted no, mainly just because that previous thing that I just mentioned wasn't clear to me. And I didn't want to. So it felt riskier far as it breaking down, far as having this vote and then just having chaos afterwards. It probably could have been tightened up. Again, at this point, we're 8 hours into the meeting, but we end up with a compromise that I don't think anyone feels thrilled with. If you're someone who wanted to go to a virtual convention so you can participate in the whole thing, you're not going to be able to. If you're someone who wanted a physical convention because you want everything done in person, you're not going to get that either. But if you're a state that would benefit from having our presidential ticket decided earlier, you'll have that. And we'll still have a physical meeting where we can all get together, bury our hatchets, do the party's business, get media attention, and do all that stuff. So to me, it's a success. It was emotional. It was intense. People acting with good intentions showed at moments not their better angels in the ways we've treated each other, in the ways we work towards the end point. And again, this goes on all sides. It was what it was. Does that change my opinions of these people? No. because it's context. There's context regarding what was going on. You know, and when you're on that body, and you, after a while, because and this is why it's probably good that most people on the LNC get replaced every, literally every couple of years, because what happens at the very beginning of the cycle, everyone wants to work together. Like when and I still love all these people, don't get me wrong, but in the beginning, everyone has got a clean slate at the beginning of the term. Everyone's going into it, and we're all excited, and we all communicate fairly openly. And then, what happens, like one person on one vote kind of does something that kind of sits the wrong way, and all these little moments break down how we communicate with each other over time. And this is essentially what happens, and it's a good microcosm of example of why large deliberative bodies like Congress and whatnot are just not the places that make big consequential decisions about our property, about our individual lives and things like that. Because individuals on a board can have the best of intentions, but when you have large group decision making, the culture always devolves, because basically everyone has an opinion of what the outcome will be, and it evolves into politics, it evolves into tactics and strategy to make those things happen. That's just the reality of it. That's to be expected on any deliberative body. That's just the nature of things. But it isn't, which is fine for a lot of decisions. And there's not really a better way to do it in a context like an organization, and the organization has a board. That's pretty much is the best way you can do it. Okay, but the more people you have on that board, the more personal, the more of the politics that happen. This is why a lot of boards for many corporations and whatnot, they're not that big. Okay, you don't end up having as much of the personal stuff, or it doesn't get personal as regularly. And when you think of something like Congress or the Senate, where there's lots of people, can you imagine how it gets there? All the paranoia and all the whatnot. I'm shocked to get anything done. And Congress usually gets the worst things done. Oh my God. But it's a good lesson to be learned, which is what I like. Again, I like about the Libertarian Party. Most of the substantive stuff that gets done isn't at the LNC. It's at the county level. It's at the state level. The most substantive thing that we do is the convention, which is why it's so passionate. Why we're so wrapped up in what's going on in these last two meetings. Yeah. So it went long for a reason. It needed to go long. I mean, it probably could have been done in 6 hours, but I don't think it could have been done in 3 or 4 hours, because there was a lot of discovery that had to happen. There was a lot of discovering where the lines were, of reading the room. I don't think there was people looking to read the room. People were just kind of, in this one, kind of like, this is kind of what I want to do. But reading the room is important. Okay, but since absent that, then it's just it's kind of like walking around in the dark. You're using your shins to figure out where the furniture is, and until you've walked around and banged your shins against a lot of stuff, you're not going to find your way to the bathroom. So we had to do that. We had to bang around our shins around among stuff, and it happened. We got to where we needed to get to. So I'm overall feeling not bad. I won't say good. I'm not happy with the situation. I'm not happy with any of the possible answers to this situation. There's no being happy here. This is not a matter of like, oh, we won, we lost. This is not, no one wins. Okay, in this situation. There's an outcome, there's a decision, and we have a choice to make the best of that decision and get together and work together to make the best of the outcome, or we choose not to. I hope you choose to work towards making things as successful as possible. Hopefully 2 years from now, hopefully, there are bylaws proposals that give us better room to have better options in the future. Hopefully 2 years from now, this whole pandemic is behind us and this is just not really even a question. Those are hopes. But the reality, this was a situation in this year. We were the people who were in these seats this year when this happened, and we had to make a decision. And the decision was painstakingly, deliberatively made. No one can say we rushed things after everything we did. Options were explored, and this had to be done from the beginning. We just had to explore all the possible options, fight them out, because nothing was going to stick till that was done. So it's done, and hopefully we can move on in a positive light. Again, I reiterate that everyone on the LNC, I can tell you straight hand from interacting with everybody for the last 2 years, these are good people. People get passionate at different points. But again, we have to think of your family. Like if you sat there and every time a family member showed their imperfect side, you just cast them to the side and judge them for all eternity, it would be really hard to maintain a family. And at that point, it would be really hard to maintain a society and all this kind of stuff. Okay? Communities, families, organizations, they require a level of us to be willing to forgive each other and move on after these fights are over with. And if we can't do that, then the vacuum of sort of hate and chaos that's left behind is exactly the kind of vacuum that the busybodies, the control freaks, those who want to usurp individual rights take advantage of. So you want a society where we don't compel each other to do things. We have to be willing to forgive each other and talk with each other, so that way we voluntarily do things. So that's why I'm always really, really kind of beating my chest about things like tolerance, kindness, and forgiveness, because it's not just about creating the absence of barriers, but it's also creating a culture that will facilitate the sustained lack of those barriers, so that way they don't get re-erected again. So that's my 2 cents. Hopefully someone cared enough to get this far. You guys have a great day and enjoy.